This is Codified Wisdom. Sharp insights, no fluff, and real-world wisdom from leaders who want to get you further, faster. Now, here's your host, Eric Eager.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Codified Wisdom. Hey, again, I am just super excited. We've got some people are literally changing communities and just, they talk the talk, but they're walking the walk. And we've got Greg Gordon and Dougan Sherwood. And let me introduce a little bit, give a little bit of background. So, my friend, Greg Gordon, he's founder and CEO of Gordon Highlander, and it's a Dallas-based construction company, but it's really known for building more than just buildings. Greg is passionate about building culture. He's passionate about building culture, and he's a third generation builder. But he has grown his company to, such an amazing trusted brand in construction, interiors, and industrial construction in Dallas. And he's working with clients like Amazon and a whole bunch of others. But people know the value of his people first philosophy. He's known for servant leadership, relentless commitment to integrity. And Greg believes the most important structures he creates are made of concrete, but also trust, mission, and the team. And so I'm excited to have him talk to his journey, and I think everybody's going to really enjoy that. And then we've got Dougan Sherwood, who has another, this amazing history. He's a national leader in innovation ecosystems and community development. Now, Dougan's a former co-founder and longtime managing director of Cambridge Innovation Center, and it's one of the most influential innovation hubs in the country. He later led CIC's efforts in St. Louis, and it helped to catalyze a thriving innovation district that's now it's a national model. He brings his deep expertise in public-private partnerships, economic development, and helping city build places where entrepreneurs and bold thinkers thrive. So today we're going to focus. He's going to be helping Dallas apply what he's learned to help he'll help shape the future of innovation in Texas. So, hey, welcome to the show, Greg and Dougan. Hey, before we get too much talking about, what the future is looking ahead, let's talk about your early days, because clearly, like we were talking, clearly if you went back to your 20-year-old selves, I don't think they would have painted this is where your life's going to be in the future. So, Greg, let's start with you first, and let's go back to your family legacy. And we don't have to go all the way back to when you're a toddler, but let's talk about you starting out in business. You're kind of finding your way, and I know that we always joke about you took a roundabout way of getting here. So let's talk about that, and then just talk about how you built Gordon Highlander.
Well, Eric, it's great to be with you, and I appreciate the comment most about the friendship. When I was starting my post-high school life, I was underwhelmed by college. I actually managed to fail out of 5 colleges and never accumulate enough hours to be a sophomore in college. My roundabout was an 8-month trip to Alaska. And prior to that, I think like most young adults, uncertain about who I was and what I wanted to be when I grew up. I think that that's still largely at play today. I'm still working that out, but at the end of my searching, I know one thing that helped me get to where I am, and that was I quit changing my mind. I just decided I was going to stick my flag in the ground and just make a life of construction work. I love building, and I love serving. And so, that 20-year-old self, it was a combination of courage and ignorance. And again, I still think that that's at play. I don't know which is which sometimes. But Yeah, I started kind of shaking off what the world was laying down. They were saying, you can't do work with your friends. And some of my best clients were becoming my best friends. They were asking me to be in their weddings, and I started coming to my own conclusions that the tenets of great friendship and relationships apply to all relationships. And so I started Gordon Highlander with a strong conviction and a purpose around building it through relationships.
Oh man. And tell us a little bit more, because that wasn't easy. Your early days, I mean, it is a highly competitive industry. Tell us a little bit about your inflection points. Like what were some of the lessons learned on the way? And then how did you have the fortitude to keep just fighting through it and pushing forward?
Pretty amazing. I think there's a lot of PTSD from those first couple years. Sometimes it's hard to go back into the memory bank. Um, yeah, I started Gordon Highlander in 2007, and shortly after I started, about 4 months into it, I went through a divorce that lasted 18 months. It was
Mm,
a high conflict divorce, and yeah, thankfully, I was a business owner, and all the distractions that came from having to, what I would call, fight for my kids, um, there was some freedom for me to be able to do that. And then all the treasure that Gordon Highlander provided went into the investment of my children and my time with them, basically. Um, 2 months after I started my divorce, which lasted 18 months, I had a guy die on one of my jobs. And
wow.
Domingo Garcia's, he's a well-known lawyer here in town. I think he has a reputation for being an ambulance chaser. He and the 14 deceased members of this gentleman's family sued Gordon Highlander and sued me personally. Um, yeah, and so all this was going on. I finally settled my divorce in August of 2008, and the charges were dropped against the company, and the entire economy slid off a cliff. And so
Wow.
I tell people I took more hits in the first 2 years of business than most business owners try to avoid in their lifetime. And I don't know really how to explain it. I know that somehow suffering makes us stronger. And um, there was no other option. It was a dogfight. And, um, I'm grateful to say that not only did we survive, but we thrived.
Man, that's an example of the grit of just showing up and just keeping and charting the path. Well, Dugan, you've got an interesting path too, because we were just talking about, I don't know if they have degrees in, economic, community development. Maybe they do now, but when I was in
Mm.
school, they didn't. Tell us
Mhm.
about co-founding, the Cambridge Innovation Center and helping cities. Tell us about that journey of how did you end up there?
So I grew up in on the East Coast on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, and listening to Greg's story, it makes me feel a little bit less alone when I think back to what I went through. Really trying to just figure out who I was and what I wanted to do. Um, I always share the story that my younger brother, the moment he saw a boat when he was 2 or 3 years old, he knew he wanted to be a boat pilot. And to this day, he drives ships, right? So all his life, he's had this very clear North Star on what he wanted to do with his life. And I've never had that. And for the longest time when I was younger, I really, really struggled with that. It isn't until the past few years I started to see the blessing in all that, and why, that frustration and sort of just lack of perspective as a young person did lead me to really interesting places, where it's a similar story, maybe to some degree to Greg, in the sense that I went through 3 schools to finally receive my undergraduate degree. I left school after my junior year and moved out west. And I chose the really only criterion that I wanted to choose when I chose where to move to was that I didn't know anybody. And that was just an attempt at my own little sort of Walden Woods experiment, learn about yourself through just sort of walking through the woods. And so I ended up in Utah of all places. And it was sort of the first time in my life I really just sort of stepped off what other people described as sort of a path. And it was the greatest thing I ever did. It gave me a tremendous sense of confidence that even if things aren't clear, is that I can have my own sort of gauge at what I want to do and what's important to me and what makes me happy. And that really did come down to it not necessarily having a degree or becoming a job, but working with people, my own sense of service, a love of community. And so that ended up kind of being what guided me into the world that I found when I came home and ended up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so in the year 2000, I met the founder of CIC. His name is Tim Rowe, and hitched my wagon. And for most of my career, I've been part of a startup company that, after 26 years later, it still, to this very second, it feels like we are fighting uphill to do work, where it's tremendously impactful, but we need to keep grinding. And there's definitely easier ways to go, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm actually speaking to you from the Middle East, where there's just opportunities for supporting innovation and economic development in every corner of the world. And so this career that I have found that began in Massachusetts, it really was informed by experiences I had out west and other places, has now given me an opportunity to really have a global understanding of what it means to be a human being, what it means to create community, what it means to drive inclusive economies through startup activity, through the wonderful world of early stage entrepreneurship. And so here I am having an opportunity to shake hands with the likes of Greg Gordon and other colleagues in the Dallas area, and as well as other places. And so I think maybe like Greg, I'm still on my walk, and who knows where tomorrow goes. But I've really gotten comfortable with and less judgmental about myself and more curious about what's next and what this world's all about. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Oh man, that's great. And you know what? I love what you guys are doing, because I think with the world today, I think the next generation of entrepreneurs are going to have such an advantage because of the access to do things that would have taken us, months, years, and they're going to have at their disposal. And so now, the idea of the next generation of entrepreneurs that, it's exciting, because the curiosity and why not approach, is exciting, because they're just going to be not really the limitations that we had, and maybe not having to learn lessons the hard way like we did. So, and let me follow up both of you on, we're in both your paths, you're now on this purpose to help the ecosystem of communities and families and cities. Was there any specific moment that, while you're on this journey, that you had this vision, idea that's leading to the next conversation we're going to have, is about the Building an Innovation Center and District in Dallas? Is there a moment you can point to, or was it just what I like to call general God winks, here and there? Tell me a little about, Greg, I'll let you go first. Was there any particular moments where this became the vision that was unfolding in front of you?
Definitely versions of visions have come along the way, and lots of opportunity. That was the other thing that I really wanted as a founder and owner of a company, was to be able to decide when to take risk and when opportunity was going to show up. What I wanted first was to buy a building. I support the process of building development by being the contractor, but I was raised by an architect and a developer, and so I knew a lot more about real estate than just the contracting side. And so I was really, really excited to get an opportunity to be an owner of a building. And that led to a great partnership. I have an amazing 13-year partnership with Tommy Tucker and Jason Moser. And we're like three really strong legs to a stool. I'm the contractor, Jason Moser is the broker, and Tommy Tucker is the investment broker. And so the way our skill sets come together has been pretty incredible. Tommy brought an opportunity to buy a building at the corner of Main and Peak, which was the first one that we bought. And we just saw tremendous trapped value. And we knew that we wanted to play the long game. We all had day jobs, and this was going to be a long approach. And over the last 13 years, we have accumulated enough property that I don't know exactly how much I own. I think it's in the neighborhood of 15 acres worth of land, and it's 20 buildings and 70 tenants. And so as we continued again to plant our flag in one spot and work it, we saw the opportunity to build our business and our approach with purpose, to think more about the community and less about the asset, and really focus on the tenancy. We saw a lot of startups. We saw a lot of tenancy that didn't have great credit, but had good stories. We saw a lot of beauty in the old buildings that we were buying, and we wanted to preserve the beauty and create an environment that supported startups and innovation. And the area that we bought in has an amazing amount of history for Dallas. We didn't know it at the time, but we wanted to name the area and give it an identity. And so we hired a historian, and the historian unearthed a railroad intersection that essentially became the foundation of Dallas. Dallas, it's not a port. It's in the middle of the country.
Yeah.
It basically, the story I tell myself is that commerce came to Dallas through a railroad intersection, and it was at the corner of the properties that we own. And at the time, the rails were operated by an operator that was in a tower, and the tower was the number 22. And that's how we came up with the Tower 22 district. And so the Godwink moment in this for me came through another friend who's a neighbor, and his world is in technology and innovation more than mine. And he was at a conference and he listened to Dougan talk, and I think he was really inspired, and he wanted to try to figure out if there was a way. And he knew what I was working on, and he brought it to me, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to try to lead this, and I just want to put a couple guys around it, and I'd love you guys to support me in these endeavors." And it just felt like it was an incredible match. I didn't know much about what the Dougan and the Cambridge Institute were doing. I'd heard a little bit about it along the way from other business leaders. And, I'm sitting on this area where I'm the majority property owner, and it's between Fair Park, Deep Ellum, and Baylor, and it's got a commercial zoning. And in my mind, it's one of the last places close to the central business district that doesn't have an identity, and it hasn't been redeveloped. and um, I'm I'm a purpose-driven leader, um, and um, I would love to build a bridge, a socioeconomic bridge, and use technology and innovation to help Dallas. And so, um, yeah, that's how this developed for me. Um, and we're about a year into it with Dougan and his team, and the the feedback that we're getting has been really strong. And so I'm encouraged. I believe that this has life and longevity. It's a big undertaking. Um, and it's just great to work with someone that's done it before.
Well, Dugan, that kind of tees you up. Again, I know that you started in other cities, but talk about again, dive into that. When was there that moment that you said, "Hey, this is a pathway for me," and then we can kind of dovetail that into what you've done in other cities, and then we'll just kind of bleed right into the conversation about what do you
Sure.
see for Dallas?
So I had as on my in my 20s, I sort of adopted this sort of mentality of if I didn't have a clear sense of what I wanted to do when I grew up, then what's the best thing to do until then? And that was, I decided to really sort of find myself around really interesting, smart people that are doing something that seems really interesting. And I fortunately lived in Massachusetts, and I'm not far away from Cambridge, where MIT and Harvard and Boston and all these incredible institutions and people from around the world. And so I ended up having an opportunity to work in the heart of the startup world, right around the year 2000, which was a really incredible time to be part of sort of the Internet 1.0 emergence. And so all that did was exposed me to people who are truly extraordinary. I worked very closely with, just as one example, one of the sort of unicorns, I guess, that sort of came out of that area at the time was Android. Android was co-founded by a guy named Rich Miner, and as Google was trying to think about acquiring them, they moved to CIC. And so for several years, we had an opportunity to really watch, an entrepreneur group that ultimately, has created one of the most largest sources of technology around the world, and sort of really understand what world-class excellence looks like. And that sort of gave me a sense of um, an aspiration of sort of where I go on myself. And so working with lots and lots of startup companies, as I had a chance to within CIC, which really is sort of the precursor to the co-working world. This was a place that houses startup companies and entrepreneurs headquartered across the street from MIT. And so having a chance to serve these companies over the years, it really gave me a sense of I want to go be an entrepreneur as well. And so the opportunity that came my way was to take CIC and to expand it. So the first expansion location that we ever took was to St. Louis, Missouri, to what is now known as the Cortex Innovation District. And my family and I moved from Cambridge to St. Louis, Missouri. And I spent several years out there standing up our first business. And that basically gave me a number of things. One is that um, to some degree, and what Greg just described in terms of his path starting this company is something that I can admire, and to some degree emulate, in the sense that I had a real sense of fear that there was opportunities for failure. My family, I had just moved my family to the middle of the United States, took little kids out of school, all these things. And so, and a company that I loved, they basically put a lot of their stock into my success, with very little structure to sort of support that. And so it was an opportunity for me to truly feel like an entrepreneur and have that sense of uh, really putting myself out there and exposure. And I did get to a place where I'm just going to do my very best, grind at it every day, and let the chips fall where they may. And I started to worry less about the results and just more about how am I doing? Am I showing up every day and doing my very best? And that's a lesson that I've been able to take to this very day. That work also brought me into a community in St. Louis that I never imagined would welcome me the way that they have. And that gave me really a real sense of the role that entrepreneurship and startup activity can play, not only in the name of technology advancement and innovation, but also from community development. St. Louis, like many cities around the United States, struggles, and it will continue to struggle. And that's because of so many of the changes of Midwestern or middle market economies over the late 20th century and early 21st century. Some of the legacies of discrimination that continue to haunt cities like St. Louis, Missouri. Um, and so that these things have multiple bottom lines. There is an economic development purpose to them, where there's trying to create jobs, trying to reverse trends of population decline, but also workforce development, trying to, at a street level, a very practical way, start to engage with people in surrounding communities who otherwise might grow up around these incredible institutions, whether they're medical schools or universities or corporate centers, but otherwise they won't have access to them. And so the concept of an innovation district really taught me that there's a roadmap, or a ramp rather, for lots of people, not only world-class entrepreneurs, but for the people in the surrounding areas that have tremendous potential, and with a little bit of support and access, they can start cooking just as well. And that was one of the messages that I was delivering when I met Greg's neighbor and friend, Nelson Burns, who came up to me after this conference that I was speaking at a couple of years ago and said, I think there's things that we can talk about, and what we're doing in Dallas, because there's a part of Dallas that really has not been able to gain enough traction from all the positive business growth in either Dallas or the state of Texas. And that's when these conversations started to take shape a little over a year ago, as Greg said.
Oh man, that is super exciting, because what a lot of people don't know is that Dallas is booming economically and from businesses. I think we're projected to surpass Chicago as the third largest metropolitan area in the U.S. and in North America. I think by 2030 is the current projections. But the area you're talking about, and for people listening to this, there is, if you can envision, there's downtown Dallas. And so you've seen all the shots of the Reunion Tower and the Ball and the Green Tower. And then there's a place called Fair Park. And then and in between that area is, a little bit of West and South Dallas has been in a, economically disadvantaged environment. And this is a bridge. The area you're talking about is going to be a bridge, because of there's so much activity going on that you create this incubation center. And at the same time, the city of Dallas has been working to Fair Park, which was they're talking about it, making it very similar to like Balboa Park in San Diego. It is a hidden gem within Dallas. And so this is a great opportunity. And I think personally, the kind of leaping off point is that there are so many headquarters of companies here in Dallas that will expand, thrive, and help these entrepreneurs. I think honestly, there is an untapped, just significant group of people that want to help. So tell us a little bit more about, you got to start the buildings. And I assume this just doesn't, like the work in St. Louis, that just didn't happen overnight. And I am sure that you had some nights where you went home and talked to your wife and kids and went, what have I done? Man, I just moved my family. And then just the grind. Talk about how long it took and what were the milestones that you hit that you're going to look to replicate in Dallas. Because the beauty that we get to leverage is that we don't have to be first. We can follow the blueprint that's been established by our friends in St. Louis.
Well, so just briefly, the work that took place in St. Louis predated me, so I was able to come out there based on the efforts and investments of other people. And so the Cortex Innovation District was something that was in its early phase when I had a chance to come out there and sort of add my voice to it in our work. And so I think that what's helpful is to sort of maybe just give you a little bit of the sort of historical sort of founding of Cortex as an innovation district, because it is in similar ways what's happening in Dallas, and that is you had a group of local people, and in the case of St. Louis, you had some real leaders in the community. This was the Danforth family and John McDonnell and McDonnell Douglas and the Chancellor of Washington University. So really the top echelon of civic and public and academic leaders in the area, who are all local, just like Greg is, and said, this is my town, this is my home. And we don't like some of the trends. There was this just ongoing recession of corporate businesses leaving the city of St. Louis. There was population decline. The sort of the gallows humor is that the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis was the high watermark of the population, and it's lost half its population since the year 1904. Right? So these are just trends that are really reversing an otherwise historic city that has tremendous pride and a sense of fight and resilience that I've come to love as much as I could anywhere on the planet. Cortex began with a couple of people talking about their city and what they want to see for it, and they started to really ask themselves, what are the assets that we can build upon? And every city has the question to ask: is that what assets do they have that are special, that give them some right to win something, and how do they go ahead and do that? And in the case of St. Louis, there might have been some strategies around, well, who can we recruit from some other city? Can we get Caterpillar to come here from Illinois or something like that? And what they said was, no, we have a tremendous university system here. And that was primarily focused around the R&D that goes on in universities like Washington University, St. Louis University, the University of Missouri system. And so they really got behind science and technology, and they found a specific part of the city and said, we're going to invest in not only the commercialization of university activity in ways that we haven't before, but we're also going to take it off campus so we can actually merge it and create a bit of an intersection. So we actually are blending with the industry, with the rest of the population that isn't necessarily tied directly to the universities, that might incentivize students to actually get to know these cities that they come from around the world to study at. And so they really create a crossroads. And that's at the end of the day what an innovation district has really come to represent. It's a physical geographic area about the size of a neighborhood that has buildings that can be repurposed or developed or redeveloped to serve a very specific focus with a mission and vision that is unique. And so there is no one mission or vision to an innovation district. There's a process to go through, and that really begins with getting a group of local stakeholders to say, what is it do we want to see for our fair city? It is themed around innovation, and that is to say, what are the things that we have? What assets do we have? What natural qualities do we possess that give us a right to win something? And that's a really difficult question sometimes to answer, depending on where you are. And that's really the process that we started to go with Greg and Nelson and this initial focus group that we're putting together as a group of people who have not only gravitas, but just a tremendous sense of business acumen and just a sort of their own unique perspective on their city and what's possible and what can we do with this big patch of grass that and Greg has some ownership on it, but this at the end of the day, Greg's willing to share the decisions that actually influence this part of Dallas with other people. And it's a good bet because these districts also have to be solvent, right? So this is not a simple project. This is not something to be subsidized by a public entity. These have to be very thoughtful projects that also, get a return on their investment and not only sort of reach the sort of the moral and entrepreneurial goals that it's setting out to do, but also make sure that it pays the bills and is worth all the investment that goes into it.
Well, kind of following up on that, what does success look like, 5 from now? What does it look like 5 years from now? What does winning look like? And then the follow up on that is that what can other business leaders, officials, founders, how can they get involved and support what you're building?
Yeah, it's amazing. I love what Dougan's trying to explain about the culture of a city. It's something that I'm experiencing as Gordon Highlander grows and goes into different markets. It's fascinating. I think, granted, how much growth and in-migration there's been, a little bit different than the story that Dougan's explaining about St. Louis. So then in my mind, I go, what responsibility then do we have? How do we continue to build rich ingredients into Dallas? What responsibility do we have? Is it always about the economic bottom line? I don't really think so. That's not the way I operate business. Results are important, but I think that they come after values. Our core values are, results is last. We're in the service business, so results has to be in there. But, if we're steadfast and we're courageously authentic and we're for others and we're a band of brothers and sisters, then we trust that the results are going to come. And so we're trying to overlay community building on top of this real estate in this area that's undefined. In my mind, success would look like attracting, first of all, the right leadership, like-minded, purpose-driven folks, care about community building, and they care about Dallas and its success. And I don't know how fast it's going to go. But in 5 years from now, I think a lot of the codification is going to be there. It's going to have legs. It will be defined. It'll have support. All of our partners will be there. And ideally, there'll be development. There'll be turnover of underutilized buildings that are obsolete. There's a big one that is about 14 acres. And we've had our eye on it for the last 13 years. And we know when it goes, it's going to be substantial. It's a lot of dirt. And yeah, it's funny, on our website for the Tower 22 district, which for the audience is Tower in the number 22 district.com. You can see me when I was about 5 years younger, just passionately talking about how to build communities where memories are made, and with parks where people would get married and where startup businesses would take off and give a city an identity and have influence over it. And so my thing is about growing and multiplication. Where it goes and how long it takes, that's the mystery. But I'm here to make the long investment.
Man, Dougan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, Greg said it all. With the, my hope also within 5 years is that there really is a true sense of community, and while we, recreate, put buildings in the ground and renovate the ones that are there and start to fill in some of the physical infrastructure, that a lot of the purpose of this will go with the programming. We go into that. What goes in those buildings, who has an opportunity to learn and contribute to programs and events and initiatives that are taking place in there. That to me is just as important as the buildings themselves. And so one of the things that Greg and I sort of decided on when we sort of set out on this work was that this is a 5, 10, 20, this is generational stuff, right? So change doesn't come easily all the time, and certainly meaningful change that can actually transform a section of the city. That's gonna take some time. And but we also said but we want to help people. We want to start telling the story in really interesting ways, sort of not in 5 years, but like soon. How do we do that? And so part of what we're going to be doing is assembling this group of stakeholders, really putting some thought into the codification of this whole thing, but also start to actually gather people and to engage with the local community and start to sort of through action start to tell the story of what this place is all about. And we've got some creative events and initiatives that we want to do. Greg's got some incredible buildings that are just waiting to be that my jaw dropped when I walked through some of the spaces that he's been able to introduce to us, because there's some real engaging space already in the Tower 22 district. And so we don't want to wait 5 years or even 2 years. So hopefully by the end of 2025, we've actually got some stuff going on that will help people really understand, what the future looks like.
And I would add to that too, and just encourage any listener out there. I don't have a magic wand, but I do believe that you can talk things into existence. That's where vision starts, and your words matter, And so I'll take a different angle on this. The other one was a humble one, but if I had to get my magic wand out or talk my big dreams into existence, I would tell you that I can see an environment where people are being educated, that the universities are really going to be able to capitalize off of Dallas having an identity that supports entrepreneurship and innovation, that it'll be a place like Cambridge is, and Harvard, where we can attract talent. The other thing that I think could be an accelerant is I love the business environment in Dallas, Texas. I tell people we get shit done. I think that's why people are moving their companies here, is because it's a very pro-business environment. And there's a lot that's thriving here. And not only is it thriving in Dallas, it's thriving in the world I believe is looking at, and it's the triangle between Central Texas, North Texas, and Houston. And so I can imagine that the school districts are going to benefit from this. And that's something that I think Dallas is really behind on. That's something that I think is a negative that needs to be addressed. And this gives you a different angle for addressing it. I don't think it solves all our problems, but it gives us a stepping stone. And you can't see the economy without looking at small and middle market businesses. That's why I think you're so interested in what we're doing too, and what For Impact Data is doing. We're trying to change the odds for business owners, right? Like you say.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose-driven part of this. And so a fertile environment where really amazing business stories are started, and then you just can't calculate the kind of impact a business can have on building wealth for the founders, for creating jobs that affect families, and all the ingredients that build great community.
Well, I'm glad you touched on the education piece of it, because here's the thing: there is so many. Obviously, I got a passion for helping in public ed, and that a lot of kids, what we're finding, that there is great opportunities for them, but no one has painted that vision. No one has, and there's a lot of good people trying to, and there's a lot of good people. I can tell you, just in the, I have the honor of participating in helping a school district here in Dallas, and And for those listening, it's Richardson, and it's a great school district. We're doing a phenomenal work. But there's a lot of kids that come in, and we've got, kids that are refugees, all the way to, very blessed, blessed families with lots of resources. But AI, what's coming is that it's a great equalizer. And what I'm seeing, or what we're seeing, is that it's going to be democratizing knowledge and information. And what it's going to unleash is creativity. The why not? And so having an innovation district, because what I always tell kids too, innovation is a code word for failure. Because you have a constant feedback loop. It's constantly testing. It's constantly trying things, and then dusting yourself off and learning and getting a feedback loop. Well, when you paint the vision of the possibility when they're young, it's I can do that. And the more that you can, and there is such phenomenal stories of business leaders here in Dallas. And I like to go back to the X Prize and how it started the space, exploration, commercialization right now. But it was started with a vision and a prize that was given. Well, a lot of people don't know the Ansari X Prize was from a family in Richardson that donated the $10 million. That their family donated it because he was going around saying, hey, we want to put commercialized space. At the time, they were saying no one can do it beside NASA. Didn't have the money, had a vision. And like, what you're talking about, somebody had the vision to say the vision of the possibility, the crazy idea, and having a space like this, because guess what? Money was given. It was accomplished. Richard Branson bought the company. Now look at it. We have it's a vision. We're talking about going to Mars next. And it all sparked from one person, one idea that was crazy enough to say, we can do this. And so to have an innovation district like that in Dallas, the vision of the possibility and the support, because it's lonely when you're building an entrepreneur, man. You know what it is. There's some lonely days when there's the other thing I forget to tell people, or tell entrepreneurs. You see all the success, like, Dougan's talking about, Greg's talking about. What they forget to tell you along the way, that you're the last one to get paid. There's those days where you can't make payroll, and you got to make those things. They forget to tell you those lean days. All they see is the nice, toys that come from successful. So, man, I can't tell you how I'm excited about the vision of what you guys are doing. I hope, if one person listens to this podcast and it sparks a conversation for somebody else, then I think it's done its job. So before I let you guys go, what I want to do is ask you about, one piece of wisdom, if suddenly I created a time machine and you could go back to the young Greg Gordon or the young Dougan, and they could give an advice of, hey, Dougan, don't do that. It's going to cost you a bunch of time and effort. What piece of advice would you give yourself and for the people listening so they don't have to make the same mistakes that we've made and they can get further faster?
Oh, I never have one idea. I always have too many. But there's business planning and there's the math and the underwriting, and no one, I think, emphasizes the courage. And courage, I believe, comes from joy, which is the opposite of fear. And fear is a good thing if it's rational. If you're next to a cliff and you're worried about falling off, that's rational. But fear can grip you, and you got to watch that. And I think joy is how you overcome it. And I would encourage any entrepreneur to be courageous. And I believe that creation and creativity is divinity. When we can co-create with the creator, there's
Absolutely.
no better combination, right?
Mhm.
And so there's just so many sparks and flames that come from creativity. And so I would encourage the audience to think about the power of creativity and how special it is. And lastly, you can't see it, but I have a metal plate underneath the skin here. And there's never any substitute for experiential learning. There are no shortcuts. Experience is the great teacher. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to be where I'm at, and to be with you, Eric, and
Yeah.
Dougan, and those are my little nuggets of wisdom.
All right, Dougan, you get to round us home, as they say.
Whereas Greg sort of had few ideas, I always struggle with this. So, what I would say is, anyway, I'd rather frankly listen to Greg just keep going, because it's pretty awesome. But I would say, if I could go back and sort of tell myself from a few years ago something, I just would sort of just tell myself it's going to be okay. Pretty tightly. A lot of people like me, I think, that are, I don't care how I come across, is that there's a decent amount of anxiety that sort of goes along with this world, and part of that's self-chosen, but also that part of that is just comes with life. And not that you're going to tell a 25-year-old who's sort of white knuckling some things that it's going to be okay. But I wish I could, right? But otherwise, I have the benefit now of having, I'm 50 years old, and so I can sort of do a little bit of look back while I'm still hands on the wheel, still going through life. And so, but I now have the perspective of some age and experience here where I can sort of say, I know it's going to be okay. And that makes the risks a little bit less fearful, and it creates room for a little bit of that joy that I think Greg was talking about. So I hope that for people.
Awesome. Well, hey, listen, man, thanks for, again, I so appreciate people coming in and sharing their stories and sharing their journeys and painting a vision. Because I know, Greg, you could have had the opportunity to just sit back on your laurels, play a lot more golf, and but you just said, "Hey, hey, God, this is my next chapter. All right, I got you." And so, thank you for both of you to take your time to be sharing it with others, and for those again, Tower 22. Go on there, contribute, find something, because I'm sure every little thing that you could do to help this team move things along will make a difference. So again, hey, well, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week on our next episode of Codified Wisdom. And, take care and, be safe out there, as they say.
Thanks for listening to Codified Wisdom with your host, Eric Eager. Want more? Subscribe and follow Codified Wisdom on YouTube, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. To learn more about Eric Eager and how 4Impact Data helps leaders get further, faster, visit 4impactdata.com.